let's talk about Grace by Grit then. Where did that come from? You talked about, briefly about it before, but you saw a problem. And how do you go from what you were doing before, you see a problem, and then you actually turn it into a business?
But Grace by Grit, and really what the ethos of the brand represented for both of us, was about how we had each experienced these really gritty moments in our lives that at the end of the day gave us our grace. For me, that first gritty moment was having my daughter at 21 years old. And what a hard time that was. But I figured it out, and I was blessed with a wonderful daughter who showed me that what love was. And also I realized that really great things can come of really hard times. My business partner unfortunately lost her first husband to cancer at a very young age. And she thought, here I am, 28 years old, massive medical debt for what he had gone through, and thought, how am I going to survive? What is my next step? I'm 28 years old and I'm already widowed. And she pushed through, and she became a high-level powerhouse executive, and that's how she defined herself, and that was her grace through that moment. And so when we started to look at that, and I think for me this goes back to, I was 16 years old, I got a job at a friend's pharmacy, and part of the pharmacy was that we delivered the prescriptions to people that couldn't make it in. So those were primarily older people or disabled people, and I was the delivery person. And it was an incredible experience because you'd go to these homes to deliver their prescriptions. Well, I was often the only person they would see for a couple of days. And so you'd hear the stories, and I was always interested in hearing the backstory of people. That has been a fascination of mine. I love hearing people's stories. Why are they the way they are? What makes them? What are their families like? What excites them, right? What pisses them off? And so I think that translated to Grace by Grit for Kimberly and I, where it was, there's all these women that have incredible stories, and they have persevered through things, whether they chose those things themselves or they just happened to them, and they figured out how to push through, and that grit became their grace. And so for us, the theme of that took on a life of its own. Little did we know it took on a life of its own. I mean, I was driving the coast 2 years after we started, and I saw these women wearing Grace by Grit on the beach doing a photo shoot, and I thought, they're wearing our clothes. I've got to pull over and see what they're doing. And I went and I talked to them, and they didn't know who I was. And they said, oh, there's these great clothes, Grace by Grit. And I said, oh, that name, Grace by Grit. I said, I just love it. Being sarcastic, thinking they knew who I was. And the woman that was there said, you don't understand what Grace by Grit means. And I said, really? I don't. She goes, no, I am a mother of 4. I have stage 4 breast cancer. I'm fighting for my life right now. And every day that I meditate, the words Grace by Grit go through my head because that defines me. And it was and that was one of 100 stories I could tell you where it was this life of its own of people really that resonated with them. And so what the brand became was that storytelling piece of, we never had models. All of the women that we used for marketing were women that were, out in our community that represented the brand really well. We talked a lot about those stories, and it became this place where women felt like they could be vulnerable and they could share, but then they could go out there and kick some serious ass because they had the apparel that was like their armor. And we talk about athletics. I mean, for us too, that was where those athletics tied back in. It's like, you're struggling. What should you turn to? Probably not alcohol. You should be turning to fitness. You should be turning to some healthy ways to push through. And so it became this whole life of its own that was incredibly wonderful to be a part of. And, that woman was right. I did not know what Grace by Grit meant to her. That was her own story, and I was so lucky to be able to hear and be part of it.